Right. Hello again, everybody. We're getting underway. We've now got about 25 participants here, and we're waiting for upwards of 70. My name is Malcolm Bowman, and with me is Ingrid Johnson. We're with the Public Health Association National Office in Canberra, and this is a webinar to talk about how to write a good parliamentary submission. I'd just like to begin by acknowledging that we're meeting on the lands of the Ngunnawal people here in Canberra and acknowledge their elders past and present. Just a quick bit of housekeeping. We're going until 1 o'clock, although we can keep going here at this end a bit longer if people want to. And this session is being recorded, at least Ingrid and I are being recorded, and we've had a lot of requests from people asking for the recording later on, so that'll be available. This session is framed around 3 sections. Firstly, we're going to describe the landscape in which Parliaments hold inquiries and do submissions, and we'll then take some questions if people want. The second section is a bit longer, and it'll be about how to write a good submission, and then we'll take some more questions. And finally, we'll describe PHAA's own internal process of creating submissions, and then we'll take questions again. The way to ask questions is to type them into the facility in the chat facility in Zoom, and we've got our colleague Rodrigo here who will pass us notes to tell us what questions we're taking. But before going any further, I'd just like to yield the chair to the CEO of PHAA, Terry Slevin, who just wanted to say a few words.
Oh, he's getting out of his chair. I have to jump in. Fabulous. High-tech stuff. Thank you, Malcolm. First, I really just wanted to say thanks to everybody who signed up for this. This is an important step in the journey in terms of advancing and improving the kind of submissions and contributions we make to public policy in Australia. It's an important process, and I've seen an enormous amount of very good work being invested in the work that's been done to date. I can tell you with some confidence from feedback from a variety of sources that the submissions that come from PHAA are highly valued by government, state and federal level. They're always recognised as being of good standard, high quality, and very welcome by policymakers. And you should also understand that people in departments, people in ministers' office, people in members' office look to quote content provided by PHAA to argue for good policy. So it is an important thing for us to contribute to. I'm delighted that you're taking some time out to learn how to contribute to that to an even greater degree. And so we're thrilled that you've signed up, and it's great that there's been such strong interest in this. And also to foreshadow, we want to do more work in this kind of sphere, and we're looking for our annual conference in September as another opportunity to improve members' capacity to contribute in what is a very important part of PHAA's business. I'm going to get out of the way and let the experts lead you, and I'll kind of float in the background, take an interest, but then I won't be able to stay for the entire exercise, unfortunately. So I hope you find it valuable. Thanks for the moment. Thanks, Malcolm.
Thanks, Terry. Okay, just quickly, we'll move along speedily because we have got a packed program. Why do we do submissions? The reason we do these things is because we're prosecuting PHA's policy missions on behalf of all the members of the organisation. Or we're doing them to raise issues even if Parliament and government haven't started raising them. Thirdly, we do it because it promotes PHA's overall standing and reputation. And I suppose there's a fourth reason, is that sometimes we do submissions because someone else has asked us to. We occasionally get asked by parliamentary committees to be a submitter, and sometimes we do it because allied NGOs want us to contribute to something with a collective effort. I'll pass over to Ingrid.
So we do a lot of these. It's around about 80 to 100 each year. So we're doing 2 or 3 submissions a week. And the policy team and national office consists of Malcolm and I. So it's a lot of work, and most of the SIGs and branches are incredibly active and involved in this, which is fantastic. So we're covering a great multitude of different topics across our policy suite that we're writing submissions on a regular basis. We do them at both national level and state and territory level, and everything that we do in the submission space ends up on our website, so that the submissions section of our website provides a really good overview of all the activity that's been going on in this space over a number of years.
Now, the next factual question is, to whom do we make submissions? Most of them, but not all of them, are to parliamentary committees. And PHA covers the federal parliament, all 6 states and 2 territories. They're all active. That's a total of about 15 different houses of parliament, most of which will have a health committee or other committees that we're interested in. In addition, some submissions are made directly to departments, usually the Department of Health or the other health agencies that we're interested in. They're often consulting on preparing government policy. Finally, there's a few special cases like Royal Commissions or the Productivity Commission. We might take up the desire to make a submission to those organisations. They're a little bit different in structure, but most of what we'll be talking about today will be phrased as if we're dealing with parliamentary committees, and we'll mention exceptions as they come up.
So parliamentary inquiries happen in a number of ways. Sometimes if there is an issue which a particular MP or senator is passionate about and starts an inquiry on. Other times it's about a bill which is being presented before the Parliament and they have an inquiry before they debate the bill. So they will establish a committee or assign it to a particular committee and call for public submissions. That process will normally take a matter of weeks or sometimes months, where the consultation is open and they're accepting submissions. And from there, the timeline can extend out a very, very long way. There will sometimes be hearings done by parliamentary committees. So they will look at the submissions that they've received and also sometimes call upon particular expertise, even if there wasn't a submission made. And people will be invited to attend hearings and give direct evidence to the parliamentary committee itself. From there, after all of the hearings and submissions are complete, reports are made. So the committee itself will produce a report based on the evidence that they have found during their inquiry. And then sometimes the government will respond to that inquiry report. Departmental consultation outcomes are a bit different. Because the submissions are not always made public on their website and there's not always an outcome report which is so clear. So the parliamentary inquiries are a very clear process and you can track through exactly how it's all progressed, but the departmental consultations, it's a bit more murky and sometimes it's a bit more difficult to see where the outcomes are.
Now, just a few words about timing, because usually we end up having to do these things in haste. The typical time between when a parliamentary inquiry starts and when they want submissions in by is usually 4 weeks, maybe 6. They can sometimes be more urgent than that. And in particular, the Senate, for example, is often doing things in some haste. Departmental ones can be a good deal longer, and we've even seen ones that as long as 6 months worth of preparation time for some of the bigger productivity commission inquiries or things like that. Once it's happened, the time the committee may want to sit and think about something after submissions can vary enormously. Again, 6 weeks might be normal, but there's a lot of variation in how this actually happens. Of course, we may not find out about something until fairly late, so we often find ourselves doing things in some haste. It's usually possible to get a day or two's extension if we ask nicely and if we know the people concerned. But by and large, we set ourselves a standard of always being on deadline.
So the submissions are always made public wherever we can by the PHAA, and the parliamentary inquiries will always make submissions public unless you specifically ask for it not to be. So sometimes they will take submissions from members of the public on particular health issues and they can be treated confidentially, but we always make ours public and put them on our website as well.
And then for you, if you're thinking of yourself as a contributor or the person identified as an author submission, you'll be wondering what protection applies to your contribution. Parliamentary privilege for the parliamentary inquiries completely covers the legal consequences of the material that goes into submission. That may not be your only problem, however. We know a lot of PHA members are employees of state departments or state agencies, and there may be an issue of what's acceptable in your workplace if you're putting your own name to material that goes up to Parliament. One of the things that we can do by putting things in PHAA's name is that we can protect the identity of our contributors if that should be an issue. On the other hand, sometimes we want to identify our contributors if they're people whose expertise adds to the plausibility of the submission. Now, at this point, we're happy to take questions. We'll press on if there aren't any, but if you've got the chat facility, you can type in short questions on all this factual material we've just been scribbling. Please do so now. If you notice the strange phenomenon of Ingrid and I glancing up to our right, that's because that's where the screen is where we can see questions that come through. We've got a couple of sort of welcome messages cropping up there, but no questions yet on the factual stuff. If they come to you right now, I'd be interested if you ever get feedback or a sense of how it was received or if it made a difference. Yes, we do. We'd like to know more. In fact, we had an intern 6 months ago attempting to track the extent to which things make a difference, but the extent to which things make a political difference to decisions is not always easy to know. We get feedback from committees if we stay in touch with the memberships of those committees a bit. And as Terry said earlier, we do know that we're on a good wicket. The PHAA has a good reputation, a credible reputation with a lot of the parliamentary committees because we're regular submitters and we put in pretty good submissions. So that's obviously given us a standing in the parliamentary community.
And the other way that we can tell, and that's what I was talking about with the difference between the parliamentary inquiries and the departmental consultations. The parliamentary inquiries, it's often a lot clearer to us because there is going to be a report at the end of the inquiry, and that report will be directly drawing upon the evidence. And so one of the things that we try to do is to go back and look at the reports that come out, and we're able to track the ways in which the PHAA submissions are being used. And what we found through going through that process is that more often than not, our submission will be directly cited in the parliamentary inquiry report. So it is being valued and held up as being good evidence, which is because we go to great efforts to make sure that what we're saying is evidence-based. Departmental consultations, it can be a little bit more difficult to see that, but then we've often got more contact with officers within the departments, and we're getting more informal feedback. We can also tell because of the number of emails that we receive every week asking us to make submissions to various things.
We've had one question from Ainsley, which I know plays directly into something we're getting onto in about 10 minutes time. So I'll just hold that for the moment, Ainsley, if that's okay. Let's move forward to part 2, which is probably the heart of this webinar, is what makes a good submission. Ingrid.
So we try to make sure that PHAA submissions all have a similar look and feel and kind of quality to them so that people know and trust a PHAA submission when it comes. So for that reason, we have a template that we use for all of them so that they look the same. We try to make sure that the messages that are in there and the arguments that are made within the submissions are very clear and well evidenced. We write them with the audience in mind. So these are not typically being written for experts in the field. They're being written for MPs who have an interest in the area but might not know a lot about it, staff of departments who would sometimes have more knowledge of the particular area, but then it varies in between. So the audience has to be considered in that way. It's not speaking to peers and experts in the field. It is speaking to a much more generic audience than that. And we also know that our submissions are, because they're available on our website, they're used by a whole range of other audiences in universities and schools and other NGOs. And so they have to be written with a really broad audience in mind and have a very clear call for action, a very clear opinion on the topic which is being discussed. We try to keep them relatively short. If they get too long, then the messages start to become lost. So 4 to 8 pages in total is round about what we aim for each time, and make sure that there is professional referencing done so that all of our arguments are evidence-based.
And now just to say, we don't know all the members, all the people watching this webinar are necessarily PHA members or looked at our website, but I'm assuming most of you have. On our website, just search for submissions, it's not hard to find. You can see examples of all the work we've been doing, and going back a few years, we've been very, very consistent in our format and style. So for virtually any inquiry that you might encounter, there's probably an example very similar that's sitting there on that website, goes back several years. Now, I want to say a few things about sort of the background to inquiries and submissions. It's really important to understand the reason why an inquiry is being held. It might be something a bit political. It might well be something that a few members of the committee are passionate about, so they've got their teeth into a particular health issue. But it's important to understand that context. It's not really an exercise in writing on a subject just for interest's sake. There'll be a start, finish and end to what the members of the parliamentary committee are trying to do, or a start, finishing and end to what a department is trying to do with the consultation process. And the more you understand the politics of what's going on there, the better things will go. It's useful to check the background of individual members of a parliamentary committee. If it's a particular health issue we're dealing with, some of them may have a personal history with that particular matter. We know that when we appear before committees, the usual thing is to find 2 or 3 really passionate members of the committee and 3 or 4 who are sitting there not quite so interested. But it's important to understand who's leading the debate on this issue with this committee. It's usually important to liaise with the committee secretariat. They're sort of quiet background public servants who work for the department, but they're the ones who write the documents in the end. And they'll be listening and taking notes and preparing things for the chairman's first draft of the report and all that sort of work. And while they're usually a bit reluctant to engage with NGOs and submitters on details of content, it's useful to know them, to be able to pass references back and forth if they want more supportive information and things like that. Now, the other thing that you should really try and do if you're doing a submission to a parliamentary inquiry is find a way of ending up appearing in person. This can be a little bit alarming to people, but it probably multiplies the persuasive influence of what we write by a factor of 10. And sometimes we get invited, sometimes we try to force ourselves in front of people. Whatever way you can do it, it's really, really, really beneficial to get, assuming they are holding hearings, to get yourself on stage as a witness, and it's an exciting thing to do. Finally, once a committee is finished, there may well be follow-up work to do. It's not all over once the written document's signed off. You want to see the report that comes out, and there will be other things to do, other ministers to lobby, other departmental processes to keep an eye on, and that context of what a report ends up being used for is incredibly important too.
So talking about appearing before committees, because it is something that we do. We've done it 4 times already this year. It's something that, as Malcolm said, we try to make an effort to do. So it is good, as Malcolm said, to know who the people on the committee are and who are the people on there who are passionate about it and who might have the most influence. To prepare, obviously, going back to the submission that we wrote and policy statements we might have on the issue is important. And then it's always good to prepare a short introductory speech. That can be a summary of the submission and can be going a little bit further if you want to in a particular area. And then they will ask questions. Typically, they will have gone through the submission and they will have questions on particular things that we have written where they're wanting clarification or more information. So any of those questions that you can answer on the spot, that's fantastic. And it's a great opportunity to be able to expand on some of those things. But the other thing to always keep in mind is to say, I will take that on notice, not to feel under pressure at the time to be producing an answer to a question that you're just not sure of, because it's very, very normal to take questions on notice and then provide follow-up information to the committee later on. And that provides a good opportunity to be able to provide the committee with extra information and references. Sometimes they will want copies of particular reports or journal articles that have been referred to in the submission or evidence.
Now, we'll take questions again at this point. I know that takes 60 seconds to wind up, so I'll just make a few additions to what Ingrid said. Many of you listening to this today may well be the talent that we want to see appear in front of committees. It's not necessarily Ingrid or me or the chief executive who will necessarily make the most persuasive appearer. So we're often looking for members of PHA with expertise in particular subject matter to appear. Now, we know that for a lot of people, this seems to be an intimidating process. So I just like to observe that in the health space, parliamentary committees are not combative to the people who appear in front of them. They want information. They want expert advice. It's not as frightening as you may first think. If Ingrid or I were ever ring you up and say, thanks for helping write the submission, now would you like to appear in front of a parliamentary committee? Please don't panic. We can go there to look after you, but it's not as political as you might think. It's all about information in the health space. Now, we've got a couple of questions appearing.
General criteria for people who want to be in the team who work on inquiry.
So we're coming to our PHA process in the third section of this, but let's just deal with that now. Anyone who's got expertise to offer or is willing to put the time in can join us in writing a submission. We're going to cover this in more detail in just a minute. But while we broadly limit input to PHA members, we've made exceptions to that too in the past if someone of particular expertise is available. So there isn't really a hard and fast working limit at all.
And yes, appearing before committees, we can definitely help out with that. It's something that Malcolm, Terry and I have done multiple times before, and we're very happy to talk you through it, have a phone call with you, talk you through the process, likely issues that might come up, and as we said, we can appear with you as well if you would like that support, either remotely or in person, depending on where it is.
So one of the other questions was similarly, how do I get involved in the working party? We're moving on into the third section of our webinar, which is about our process. Ingrid will take the next section dealing with how we find out about committees, and we'll get to that question in just a minute.
So this goes back to Ames's question. How do we know what inquiries are happening? Lots and lots of different ways. So National Office is part of a number of different mailing lists where we will be sent information about current inquiries and consultations that are going on. Very occasionally, we manage to find the time to do a bit of a sweep around the websites to have a look. But one of the other ways that's really, really important for us is when you guys find out, when members, branches and SIGs find out about consultations in their specific area of expertise, and let us know. If you send us an email and say, this is happening, did you know? I think it's something important that PHAA should talk about. That's really great information for us, because it not only lets us know that something is going on where we might not have otherwise, but it also alerts us to a particular member who would be interested in helping out. So we're very, very happy to receive those communications.
And I'll just pick up that two questions have asked, how do I get involved? And I suppose that's the heart of what people have logged on today to try and find out. Just contact us. There is no hard and fast rule about whether what you have to say is going to be the right kind of thing. Contact us anyway, and we'll talk it through. Somebody mentioned mentoring. In a sense, Ingrid and I, that's what we do, is we help mentor people to get the information out of your expert heads and onto the page. If you want, we could put people in touch with others who've been contributors in the past. That's not difficult. The other lead figures in our submissions are usually the coordinators of the SIGs, special interest groups of PHAA. Most of our liaison over submissions will be with SIG conveners or people closely connected to them. So by default, we'll tend to treat those SIG conveners as key communication points. We don't really have a formal structure for the working party for submissions under such a name. It just happens organically. But the default answer is just contact us and we'll help you all the way through the process. Now, the next question we were going to cover is how do we decide whether we're going to do a submission on a topic? Rough estimate, there'll be 1,000 inquiries a year going on around Australia, even vaguely connected to the information and the issues that are of interest to PHAA. We haven't a hope of dealing with all of them. So we have to triage and prioritise. And I suppose the very first question Ingrid and I will ask, or others will ask if you're bringing things to our attention, is to what extent is something a core issue of PHA's policy concerns? No right and wrong answer to that. Sometimes, Ingrid and I will tend to triage things into high, medium and low, and sometimes we can discover pretty quickly that the initial judgment wasn't right if we're reacting to other factors. It's a big factor whether a SIG or branch or individual PHA members are on the phone to Ingrid and me saying we really should do something on this. That's probably the strongest single motivator we'll have for knowing that we're going to have expert helpers to write a submission, and that somebody outside of our office is judging that it's of significant political or public importance. We here in National Office might have a strategic reason why we're doing something. For example, even an inquiry that it's a little bit secondary might be to a committee that we're really trying to build a big relationship with. So those factors may come into play a little bit, and we'll put an extra effort into some things. But to come back to the final issue, time constraints and capacity really do matter. We have to let a lot of stuff go in a sense because we simply can't do them all, or we can't do them all to the quality standards we expect of ourselves. And we have to prioritise. So the whole exercise, and quite literally every working week of Ingrid and my lives, we're finding new submissions on the government websites to put on the maybe list, and we're trying to work out how we prioritise which we do.
So we do have a long working list of maybe we should do this. If we think that it is something that is likely to be important and likely to engage interest, then the first thing we'll do is include it in the pump. So you will have seen in the pump in the policy section that we have an area where we talk about submissions that we've made recently, follow-ups sometimes from previous submissions that we've made, and we've got a list of current ones that we're considering. That's a great place to go to have a look at what we're thinking about at the moment and to stick your hand up and say, yep, that's something I'm really interested in doing. We'll also notify the SIG conveners or branch presidents directly to say, is this something this is in your patch? Is this something that you think it is worth doing a PHAA submission on? Sometimes they'll say, yep, we already know about it. We're looking at it. Excellent. Other times they'll say, well, not sure. Let's send it out and see what happens. So then the next stage is that we will send an email to the members of the particular SIG and or branch that the inquiry or consultation relates to. We'll then see what response we get to that. Typically, we'll get a handful of responses and then we will gather together a group to work on the submission. So we will link in the SIG conveners and branch presidents always to the emails, as well as the people who've said that they want to contribute. If those emails, if the call out for contributions doesn't yield any responses, then unless we've got a really high level strategic interest in doing it, that's the sort of submission that will probably then fall away and come off the list of maybes.
I just want to pick up on a question again from Ainsley about the mailing list we use to monitor the parliamentary and government websites. Can we share that list? Yeah, no problem with that. I've still not yet figured out how to email things to everyone in this webinar audience today, but I'll find a way. But roughly speaking, every parliament has such a thing. Some of them have automated facilities that give you alerts in topic areas, and they're good. You can set them up. The health departments and other departments of government, state and federal, will tend to have a single page where they're listing current inquiries. So it's probably upwards of 24 different websites that we have to keep an eye on, but we can share that list around. Now, I'd like to turn a little bit to the nuts and bolts of the writing process that we follow when we're putting a submission together. And one of the things I'd just like to remind you that varies enormously is the extent to which Ingrid and I might be leading a drafting process versus at the other end of the spectrum, the extent to which contributors might be leading. There's no right or wrong answer. So, but really everything is initiated here. The least we'll do is make sure we're providing either a template to a contributor who's expressed interest, or Ingrid and I might take the template, stick in the questions that a parliamentary inquiry has posed, because often they say, we're dealing with the following 6 questions or something. Go to our policy base, the 80 or so PHAA policies that appear on the website, cut and paste the bits that are the most relevant, and at least start a working draft. And then we'll transmit that out by email to all those who've expressed interest and say, right, improve on this, everybody. So there's not one strict way of doing it, and some things will be led heavily by you guys, and some things might be led fairly heavily by Ingrid and me seeking responses. I want to stress again, we do tend to want submissions to start by looking at the policy position statements of our organisation, because a huge amount of work, and one day we may do a separate webinar on that, a huge amount of work goes into creating PHA's very extensive base of policy position statements. And having done that work, that actually provides us with a lot of the raw material, including literal text, putting in parliamentary submissions. The process we follow here also involves having a check of past inquiries on this subject or by this committee to get some deep background knowledge of what lies behind this particular inquiry. Sometimes an inquiry is actually referred in a sequence covering the same topic over a few years, or is very similar to past inquiries, where we really want to, in a sense, copy what we did before, but know exactly what's happening with the membership of that committee. And what then follows, one way or another, is a whole lot of drafts fly around by email. And Ingrid and I get to meet PHA members virtually through this process. We find out who's interested in what subjects and what expertise they have. There's no single way in which that email traffic eventually starts landing on drafts, but as the date of submission draws near, we'll have to start saying, okay, it's due on Friday. Here's what looks like good draft number 3.6. Is everyone in agreement? And our job at that point is to shepherd things towards finality, whatever's happening. We usually need to make sure we've finished the draft perhaps 24 hours before deadline, just so that we can do our quality controls at this end. It varies, but we need to make sure that key people involved in the process have a chance to sign off and say they're happy with the very final version. There's always a process at the end where we check references and make sure that everything's in the right stylistic frame, because we're we place a high standard on making sure that the appearance of our documents with references all in the right place, in the right style, all looks professional and good. We'll proofread everything and give it a last quality control. And that's what you can expect us to do at the end. But of course, if something's 95% being done by contributors, you'll be involved in that writing as well. No hard and fast answer.
And then in the last 24 hours, it's then the endorsement process. So typically all of our submissions are signed off, first of all, by Terry as the CEO, and then co-signed by the relevant SIG conveners and or branch presidents. So sometimes we'll have submissions with 3 signatories on them. And that's done that way so that we have the kind of leaders in the PHAA signing off on everything that we do. Do the branches and SIGs do submissions on their own? Well, hopefully National Office is linked in as early as we can. There are lots of advantages to linking in with us early. We are regularly doing liaison with the committees and comfortable doing that and know some of the people who work on them. We are able to create the template and provide some of the introductory material to it. And sometimes we will know, because we know all of the submissions that have been done, sometimes we will know that we've done one on this topic very recently, and actually it's going to be very quick to write, and there's no need to reinvent the wheel. So for example, South Australia did a submission a few months ago on single-use plastics, and in the ACT, there is a new inquiry which is just about to start on single-use plastics. So rather than someone in the ACT having to start again and write all of that, we've got the material ready to go, and that will be a very, very quick one to do. And that's something that National Office can help with because we know everything that's been going on. It also enables us to try to access other contributors through the emails that go out to the broader membership with other people who can help you do it. And of course, all of the finicky bits, the formatting and finalising of references and all of that, we're able to do for you so that you don't have to spend your time doing that. But also, the earlier we know, the better, because the stuff that we do does take time, and with only 2 of us, we have to figure out our workload. And so the earlier we know that something's going on and when the deadline is, the easier it's going to be for us to make sure that we fit it in and give it the amount of time that each one deserves. And yes, the signing off done by the people in leadership positions so that we also are able to protect, as Malcolm was talking about earlier, particular members who might want to be involved but might not be able to put their name to something publicly.
And another feature of the state branch submissions issue, because perhaps 10 or 15% of submissions come up at a state branch level, is that we want to cross-fertilise. If something's going on in South Australia, the issue is likely to come up in other states straight away, or soon if it's a hot issue. We want the consistency between state branches of PHA about what we're telling state parliament inquiries at the state level, but we also want to save people work, because if we put the effort into writing a reasonably solid submission on issue X, we don't have to reinvent the wheel if another state is facing the same policy question in an inquiry process. That's why we publish everything, by the way, with very few exceptions. If we don't have permission to, all the submissions go on the website. So if you're doing something at state level, quick check of whether a different state has had the same issue come up in the last 2 years is worth using your time. Now, one other issue is the issue of alliancing. PHA is one of several public interest NGOs that share overlapping interest in arguing for policy outcomes. And many of them are here in this suburb here in Deakin and Canberra. We also often like to check whether friendly other public interest NGOs are putting in a submission on the same topic. There's a little bit of sharing goes on. And the other option is if something's reasonably big and nobody's got any time, somebody writes a submission and the other NGOs send a letter of endorsement. Is not an uncommon way of just saving time. And sometimes having 6 or 8 NGOs all put in a joint submission might happen to be more persuasive. Other times you might think that each of you doing one separately is going to be more persuasive. It can vary a little bit. But we're not alone. We work in combination with various other NGOs who share our interests and values on a lot of topics.
We'll cover the next one, so it's just the last.
Covered publicly. So the last, and by the way, it's a good time to start writing questions again, because perhaps we talk fast, but we're coming to the end of our standard script. Just to finish up, as I said, we do publish everything. Strictly speaking, parliamentary committees usually ask us to wait till they publish things on their website before we put things in the public domain. And that's okay. Some of them are more sort of strident about that than others. And finally, what's the reaction to our submissions? It's not uncommon for us to get media interest. And this office here in Canberra can handle media interest. And it's also not uncommon for our submissions to get picked up and cited by expert audiences for completely unrelated context. If we've created a really good, simple 4-page pithy argument about a subject matter with all the right up-to-date references, our stuff can get used by others. Okay, so we are getting to another question time. There's a few things we'll say to wrap up, but it seems a bit early to that. So can I encourage people to start typing us questions? And that's why we're staring up at the right-hand side of our screen, as you can see.
Are there any questions that we haven't dealt with yet that came before?
I think none flowing in just yet. One thing I want to say is a big thank you. I don't know whether the audience of this webinar is just all of people who've never done a submission before, or whether many of you have done. But the unpaid labour by people who help us write submissions is enormous. There is no way this office could produce 100 submissions a year just on our own effort. So it really is a very big joint effort between the staff here in this office and all the volunteers out there in PHAA member land. So I'd like to recognise and say thank you for that.
Okay, so we do have a couple of questions now. One about showing translation of research into practice and how you can use the submission process to support that. There's a couple of things that spring to mind for me with that. One of them is that parliamentary inquiries particularly are very fond of real-life examples. So often we will put in a submission with a really solid evidence base around taking a particular position on something or why a policy should go in a particular direction. And then the committee will say, can you give us examples? Can you tell us about a particular program operating somewhere in Australia that demonstrates what you're talking about? And it's fantastic to be able to tap into some of those examples. So wherever you're able to provide those sorts of examples, it's really, really useful to us, both at appearing at a hearing and also just during the submission writing process. It's good to be able to include examples like that.
Picking up two more questions that have come through. One was, do we automatically write a press release? No, we don't automatically write one. In fact, I think that'd probably be reasonably rare for us to put a press release out just on the day of lodging a submission. It might seem a little bit not quite the right thing to do because the committee won't have time to read the submission until next week, sort of thing. We may well do something to attract media attention if we put in a physical appearance, because that's usually something that is capable of attracting media attention anyway. But I don't think, it wouldn't be our practice to put out a release every time just the day we lodge a submission, which sadly is usually 5 o'clock Friday afternoon anyway, because that seems to be the deadline almost everyone puts for doing submissions. Now, another question which somebody said they thought might be a little bit unsavoury. No, it isn't. Can you cite work on a submission on your CV? Well, of course you can. If your name's on it publicly, there's not the slightest reason why there's any bar to you citing it on a CV or any other usage you may want. They're public documents. There's no inhibition whatsoever on anyone citing things that appear on the websites of Parliament.
One of the things that we have been toying with and are actually keen for feedback from members on is with the signatory process that we have, where it's signed off, as I said, by the CEO, SIG convener, branch president level. It does mean that there are usually contributors whose name does not appear on the submission. And as we were saying, there's a variety of reasons why people might not want their name to appear. However, as you pointed out, there could be really good reasons why you do want it to appear as well. And so we are toying with the idea of creating an acknowledgement section that we include in submissions, where we ask each of the contributors, do you want your name on this publicly or not? and then those who do can be included in an acknowledgement section. If that's something that sounds like it would be helpful, then please let us know, and it's something that we can discuss and decide upon at the AGM face-to-face.
We've got 2 or 3 more questions coming in. Please keep the questions coming. I'll deal with the next one. I'm a new PHA member just this week. This is the best start to a question you could possibly have had. That's great. Welcome. Is becoming involved in a SIG a good place to start? Yes, it is. The basis of topic interest work in PHAA is to work through the SIG committees, the SIG conveners who we're in constant communication with. But there's no bar to individual members of PHAA contacting us at all if we're to do so. But the SIGs are the place where you'll be mixing and meeting and sharing ideas and policy thoughts with people with the same common interests as yourself.
Great question from Julia about when we have opposing interests that are likely to be making submissions as well. Yes, sad fact about public health, often we have opposing interests, often they are big, strong industry opposing interests. And yes, we definitely have to anticipate and respond to those in the submissions that we make. So how we do that happens in a variety of ways, and a lot of it is down to intel from our members who are working in the field. So when there's a big policy debate that's going on, so for example, with in Julia's space, with mandatory warning labels on alcohol going on at the moment, we try to, wherever we can, to tap into people who are really close to that field, who know what the debates are that are happening at the moment and where industry might be pushing back really hard. And they are things that we can then focus on and develop our arguments a bit more strongly around, anticipating where industry are going to want to make ground and what our arguments can be against that. It's inevitable that that's going to happen, and so it's something that we've got to be aware of in our submissions if we possibly can, especially where they might be departmental consultation ones, and there might be fewer opportunities to do things like presenting evidence in person. We have to make sure that what's written in our submissions is really, really strong and covering those areas in case that's the only opportunity we get.
Yeah. Now, please keep the questions coming. This is going well. 3 of the next things are comments, all endorsing the idea of acknowledgement section. So I think that has now been voted up today. That is a thing that we will now do. And one other question that's appearing is, what's the focus of our template? Look, the template's really very simple. It hasn't got a focus. It's simply the common title page, common content page, a 3rd page, which is called the preamble, which sort of recites the PHA's missions and goals. And then it's just a heading structure. And then finally a sign-off and endorsement. So the template is really designed to make all of our documents have a common appearance. It doesn't have a structural focus that forces you to write anything. There's simply be a heading structure. What I will say is that often a committee will have a terms of reference, which is useful for us to follow. So, if there are 5 terms of reference, what the committee is looking into, we just use that as 5 section headings. Or the committee or the departmental consultation, if it's one of them, may have posed 10 questions, in which case we'll use them as a heading structure. That's not strictly required. We can really put in any piece of writing we want, but it always helps if we're following the line of logic that the committee and the secretariat or the department and its public servants are trying to follow. It will be unhelpful if we vary much from it.
And it also helps when particularly departments insist on having horrible online surveys that we have to complete, where we have to do a cut and paste into the particular questions. And just on that, when that is the process for putting in a submission, we will always do one in our standard PHAA template as well anyway, so that we've got a nice version to put on our website for our records. So we'll always use the template as the draft version going around in emails to create the final product. Most of the time, that's it. But occasionally, we do then spend fun time cutting and pasting onto an online survey.
The next question's a cracker. Please keep the questions coming. We'll keep going as long as you guys are willing to. But one thing I'd observe is that there's another short form of submission, which is just the 1 page that are saying we endorse the submission of FAIR or ACOS or something like that. They're submissions too for technical purposes. And if it really is as short as a 1 page letter from the CEO, we wouldn't bother putting it in the template if that's what we're trying to achieve. Now, this next question's a cracker. How do you manage when there is not consensus among the PHA team to an issue? Well, that's us. Look, that doesn't happen very often.
Well, the writing team.
I think, and if it's the writing team or the wider PHA team of contributors, I think cases where there are a high level of dispute are fairly rare. And we'll use our common sense. If there's a substantive content of policy dispute amongst our members in what we should say, well, we'll have to work it through to resolve that. I've never seen a case which actually sort of led to us being unable to put a submission in. But what that usually does is it gets you guys out in PHA member land to discuss something, and that's what we want to see. Ingrid and I are professionals. We have a lot of sort of backgrounds ourselves and information in our heads, but we can be neutralists about the policy content if there's a dispute among the members. We'll just get the job done with getting the submission to an endpoint. And I'd like to say I don't think we've had very many examples of damaging disputes at all. And the substance of disagreement over issues or what should be emphasised is a healthy one.
And it leads to all sorts of other things. So we did one recently in the complementary medicine space where it led to some quite vigorous debate amongst members because it was addressing a particular policy topic about which PHAA doesn't have an existing policy statement. And so that's fantastic because then the debate is up and ready to go so that we can then develop one. So what we'll do trying to come to an agreed position is we will rely on, first of all, our policy statements. We will always go back to them if there is one. Basic public health principles, we want to make sure that we align with them really closely. And we will also be very heavily steered by the branch president, SIG convener, experts in this particular field, who are the ones who are signing it along with Terry and therefore taking the ultimate responsibility for it. But yeah, the debate is usually very healthy and helps us flesh out issues that we clearly need to anyway.
I'll leave Ingrid, you take that next question, but I'd just like to reinforce what I said a minute ago, which is that the discussion is healthy. If we're finding differences amongst our members, well, we're not trying to stir things up, but I'd positively encourage you to email each other, work through the SIGs as a form of communication. And it is through this process that we refine evidence and improve our policy positions. So don't be afraid of it.
Yeah, so we've got a great question. PHAA is very careful to ensure our policy positions and arguments are evidence-based and properly referenced. Other submitters, such as big industry, aren't as concerned about this, can flimsy with the evidence and sometimes outright lie. Yeah. Are there any protections in the policy process to prevent inaccurate information from affecting policy? It's a great question. And it's one of the reasons why we spend so much time wanting to ensure that the PHAA policies have a similar look and feel and are always evidence-based, because we want to be really clear that without even necessarily reading the detail, you can look at a PHAA policy and see all the evidence and referencing that it's got against a, should we say, more opinion-based and less evidenced submission, and know that ours immediately feels more reliable and solid. So that's a really important reason for that. And that's why sometimes we will, during the drafting process, go back to you and say, yep, great statement, but you've got to reference it. And sometimes we will push back hard on you for them. And so inaccuracies, well, I would hope that there aren't inaccuracies in ours, and that's part of making sure that everything is evidenced and that everything is seen by multiple pairs of eyes, and hopefully multiple pairs of eyes who know about the particular topic, so that we're constantly checking each other and making sure that we're getting a number of different opinions and evidence sources to come together so that things like that don't slip through.
And I'd add that people who join PHA don't usually do so as part of a collective whole. They've all individually chosen to join. Our organisation is full of active members, and they're members who've got a genuine interest or decades of expertise in subject matter. And that process keeps us strong in making sure we're not making inaccurate claims. We're pretty reluctant to put in things that are just generalised statements of opinion where we can't find a reference. If we've got that on the page, we're not going to want to put that on the final page. We also have a reference database that we keep lies behind our sort of writing tool with a couple of thousand PDF files of various references, and we often use them in repeated ways. It's a simple sort of content management system. So we're citing the same documents again and again on the same topics rather than making things up.
And we're picky about what we'll cite too. If you, if people are sending in drafts that are full of references that are actually just news articles, then we're going to want proper peer-reviewed evidence to be used.
Please keep your questions coming. We've got 3 or 4 minutes we can keep going on this before we wrap up. Someone was wondering how often position statements are updated. Now, we may do a second whole hour on that very question on how we make PHA's policy position statements. But just briefly, we've got about 80 position statements. The rule is they're all reviewed every 3rd year. So at any one time in a process that starts in January and finishes about now, members are reviewing about 30 or 35 policy position statements. That's the cycle. It's a separate part of Ingrid and my working life here. And we'll do another webinar on that if there's demand for it.
And at the moment, all of the ones that are being reviewed for this year are sitting on the member forum area, ready for you to go and have a look at and make any comments on if you would wish.
Yep. So keep questions coming in. Otherwise, we're getting towards wrapping up, I suppose. Couple of things I'd just like to do by housekeeping. Please comment. Please get in touch with us, Ingrid and I, at policy@pha.net.au if you've got any further follow-up questions, or if there's anything more we can do to help you build your skills in submission writing. Please comment on this webinar. This is the first one we've done. We've been meaning to do it for 6 months. We finally found time to do it. This actually doesn't take as much time, so we can do this again. And I think we're thinking of doing a session similar to what we've done in this hour at our annual conference in September in Adelaide. And we're thinking of doing another hour just like this on that process mentioned a minute ago on how policy position statements are created. We probably should have done that in about January because that would be the right time to get people up to speed, but we can do that if there's demand for it.
And one more housekeeping issue, just wondering if you can let us know in comments if there's more than one person in the room with you right now. Just trying to reconcile the number of registrations we had with the number of attendees that we've got. So if you're sitting in a room with multiple people listening to this, then please, if you can just note that in the comments right now, that'd be great.
It would be interesting to know exactly who's been watching this last hour. We've got all your email addresses, and I suppose it gives us an idea of where your workplace email might be. But we don't know what themes of interest you've got, other than you're all obviously interested in writing submissions. So we don't know what topic areas you're more interested in or what states you're from. And we don't need to know exactly, but be interesting to find out. And the other thing I'd be really interested in is knowing, and a couple of people mentioned it, if you're all new members or younger members, which is, I suppose, is an assumption we might make that the more experienced members don't need a webinar on submissions writing. But just to improve us deciding what we put time into doing these things again, it'd be great to get feedback. Thanks. And 3 people have written just me coming through on the comments section. So look, we really are getting towards the end. If we've got no more, there's a
Thank you, Nina.
Thank you, Nina. We'll wrap this up. I'd like to thank everyone who's taken the time to be involved. I'd like to repeat the message that this has been recorded. It has been recorded, hasn't it? This has been recorded because we had a dozen people ask if they could see the recording. So if you're watching this in the days ahead on the recording, thanks for your interest as well. And I'd like to repeat my offer that if anyone wants to contact this office and pursue these issues or seek more detail or more mentoring on any of these issues, you're very, very welcome.
And thanks everyone very much for your participation today. Would be great to have a webinar on policy position statements. Yes, okay. We will do that.
A couple of votes for that, so that's a yes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, with that, thank you again, and go well.
Thank you, everyone.